Hi, I'm Joe Neal, and I'm in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And I wanted to share with you a program about the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. And Pawhuska is in northeastern Oklahoma, and the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve is in the Flint Hills. And it's a good place for us to go out and see all kinds of interesting birds and prairie flowers. So I thought I'd share that with you now. Still working on it. And so there's an interesting new book called Visions of the Tall Grass, and I thought this would be a good place to start the program. So I also decided to use that as the title. And just a little bit of information first. This is in the Tallgrass Prairie ecosystem, and you can see it's a really big area here. And you can see where the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve is in northeastern Oklahoma. And I promise that this will be the only one of these kind of slides that you see. Just a little information about the Tallgrass Prairie. It's currently about 40,000 acres, and it's part of the original Chapman Bernard Ranch. And if you go to Pawhuska, Oklahoma, and go north, that's how you get there. And it is owned by the Nature Conservancy that depends on donations. So remember that if you got some cash. And one of the great things that you'll see at the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve is a herd of free ranging bison. And here they are with calves. The herd's about 2,500 animals. And this is a bison wallow where they roll around in the soil to get bugs off of them, and they make these interesting little depressions that are used by lots of birds, including chorus frogs. And here are the bison with a couple of calves. And by the way, I'm nowhere near as close as you might think in this photograph. This is taken with the aid of a telescope. And you can see a bison in here with an ear tag, and that is where they're doing genetic testing on the bison. They're trying to breed out all the cattle genes. And here are the bison moving through the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve. This is a very typical view when you're driving through the public roads. And so here's your only quiz on this program. What is this bird? Okay, I'll tell you. It's a brown-headed cowbird. The old name for it was bison bird or buffalo bird. And you see them following the herds. And one of the things that birders really like to see are greater prairie chickens. And these are greater prairie chickens on a lek where they're forming pairs that will then nest. And one of my favorite pictures, a greater prairie chicken on top of bison dung. It was the highest spot in the whole area. And you can see the sacs that expand. They're booming. They go, ooh, ooh. And that sound is produced in these orange sacs that you see in place. Oh, and one of my favorite birds, upland sandpipers, nest on the tallgrass prairie. More upland sandpipers. And ornate box turtles live there. And in the winter, they're rough-legged hawks. This is a blackmore, rough-legged hawk, and nighthawks. And they've got to find a spot to perch during the daytime, and this fence post was just right. And Henslow's sparrows nest there, a bird that's pretty rare otherwise. And here is Henslow sparrow singing on top of one of the native flowers. and eastern meadowlarks nest on the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve, and dick sizzles, and red-headed woodpeckers. This is a young bird that's just starting to acquire the red feathers. This is a Lapland longspur, or as my friend Donna Mulholland calls them, Sami longspurs, for the Sami people of the Laplands. Horn larks, and a mixed flock. So pick them out there. I see horn larks and Lapland longspurs, or Sami longspurs. And this is a red-shafted flicker, spotted towhee. And who's this? Oh, it's a short-eared owl. It's a grassland owl that nests in part of the preserve and is there in numbers in winter. And tree sparrows, savanna sparrows, and lark sparrows nest on the preserve. And Buick's wren that's disappeared from much of the eastern United States, but is still fairly common in this area of the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve. And this is a snipe down in the grass. And I know this looks like a snake, but it's actually a lizard. It's called a glass lizard. And they actually act a lot like snakes, but they're actually lizards. And this is an actual lizard too. This is a mountain boomer, or eastern collared lizard. And lots of interesting plants. The native plant communities on the tallgrass prairies in the Flint Hills of where the tallgrass prairie is located are pretty amazing. And many of these plants are really important for all kinds of pollinators, and they don't occur anywhere else in many cases. And monarch butterflies migrate through the tallgrass prairie region in great numbers in the fall, but not like they did at one time. And there's now talk that this butterfly is going to be listed as threatened or endangered because the populations have plummeted so much. You need places like the tallgrass prairie with the abundant native plants to sustain pollinators like monarchs. And everybody's welcome to visit on the public roads that go through the tallgrass prairie, but they want you to stay on the roads pretty much, except for designated trails, because there are bison throughout the area. But this is a Northwest Arkansas Audubon Society field trip group. And a few friends on a trip. And this is on one of the trails. There are a few actually designated trails. And it's just a great place to go. You see the bison crossing behind them. That's kind of what you see when you're out on the tallgrass prairie. The bison herds move throughout much of the 40,000 acres, and you keep a safe distance. And I really appreciate the music behind this by Jack Williams. And I hope you'll have a chance to visit the Nature Conservancy's Tallgrass Prairie Preserve in northeastern Oklahoma. And thank you for watching. I also wanted to dedicate the program to my friend Harvey Payne, who was the first director of the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve and had a lot to do with protecting this land when it appeared to be lost. And he is still out there, and he's an avid wildlife photographer. And there's a great book if you'd like to get out and see some of this firsthand. Prairie photographs by Harvey Payne, Visions of the Tallgrass, and his friend Jim Ronda did some essays that are great, a great read. Thanks a lot.